December 14th, 1944. Snow sifted down over the outskirts of a ruined farming village near the Sour River as Private Samuel. Sam Delaney trudged forward with the remnants of his rifle squad. The Ardennes forest behind them looked like a black wall of trees swallowed by freezing fog, and the sound of distant German artillery thumped in dull, uneven pulses that made the ground tremble. Sam's breath came out in hard white bursts. He was 23 years old, from a wheat farm in Nebraska, and his hands had been steady enough to shoot coyotes off fence posts back home. But this was different. This was the Bulge. This was a German army hitting back with a fury no one had expected. The platoon had been scattered in the chaos of the morning attack. Trees had exploded under shell fire. Men had sprinted blindly through the snow, and radio wires had snapped like brittle twigs under tank treads. By early afternoon, Sam's squad, 9 men reduced to 5, was ordered to push through the village outskirts and secure a supply route. Only when they reached the first broken stone wall did they hear the sound that made every American soldier's blood run cold. The stuttering, ripping metallic roar of an MG42 tearing through the air. The first burst wasn't aimed at them. It came from deeper in the village, where a road choked with debris turned sharply left near an old barn. But the sound alone pinned them. Sergeant Whitaker, a grizzled 36-year-old who had survived North Africa and Italy, flattened himself against the wall and hissed for everyone to stay low. Bullets whickered overhead, slicing through tree limbs and sending snow down in powdery curtains. "MG42, Whitaker muttered, jaw tightening. "Close. They've got the road zeroed." Sam felt the cold sink deeper into his bones. He had heard the weapon before, every soldier had, but hearing one this close, with its impossible rate of fire, was like being trapped beneath a buzzsaw. The Germans called it Hitler's Buzzsaw, and it earned the name. A single team could stall an entire company if placed well, and this team was placed perfectly, somewhere behind that road bend, likely inside or beside the barn, pouring fire straight down the only route forward. Lieutenant Branson radioed what little they knew, but command wasn't sending help. Not now, not while chaos swallowed half the line. So the squad pressed on, crawling through snow, slipping between shattered stone walls as the MG42 chopped everything that dared move in the open. They found Corporal Jennings, one of their own, lying on his side, behind a destroyed cart, eyes open and glassy. He had tried to cross the road. The MG42 had cut him down in 2 seconds. Whitaker's voice was tight. "We flank it. We got no choice." But the flank was a mess. The left side was blocked by a flooded ditch and a collapsed stable. The right side ran along a row of barns and farmhouses that had been hit by shell fire, their roofs sagging inward. The barns might provide cover. They also might hide Germans. The thought of walking blindly into one made Sam's stomach knot. The squad moved anyway. Inside the first barn, the air smelled of cold mould, wet hay, and burned wood. Light leaked through broken slats, stripes across the floor. Sam swept the room with his M1, boots crunching ice crystals, breath steaming. No Germans. No movement. Just a dead cow in the corner, and wind cutting through the gaps in the wall. The MG42 opened up again. Sam flinched as the walls trembled with the sound. The barrel team was close, too close. The resonance told him the gun was firing from somewhere very near the far end of the barn row. The rounds weren't aimed into this structure, but they were ripping apart something just beyond it. Each burst was long, cruel, and confident. Whoever operated that weapon knew the value of the choke point. They were holding the Americans pinned on purpose. "Delaney," Whitaker whispered. "You shot back home, right?" "Yes, Sarge." "You good with improvised positions?" Yeah, I can be." Whitaker nodded once, grim. "You're gonna need to be." They moved deeper through the barn row, ducking through doorways, crawling under fallen beams, stepping over shattered planks. At one point they froze when soft German voices echoed from outside, a patrol passing just yards away. The Americans didn't breathe until the boots faded into the snow. At the third barn, the firing sounded different, sharper, louder. The rounds were ripping past the outer wall with vicious precision. Whitaker held up a fist. Everyone stopped. Sam pressed his ear to the cold wooden boards. He heard it clearly. The MG42 was less than 30 feet away, but there was something else too. A pattern. Sam listened again. The bursts were long, but the angle was fixed. That meant the team was firing down the road, not scanning the area. They were confident their flank was covered. They weren't expecting Americans in the barns. Sam's mind worked quickly. The slats in the barn wall formed irregular vertical gaps, and some barely an inch wide. He lowered himself and crawled along the wall until he found a place where the wood had rotted through, leaving a rough, fist-sized cavity. Snow blew in through it. Through that hole, he saw the roads bend and the faint flicker of muzzle flash from behind a log barricade just outside the barn's far corner. He exhaled, slow. The German MG42 team was firing from a dug-in nest, partly shielded by the barn's exterior wall. They had built a half-circle of logs and crates, giving themselves cover and creating a murder zone down the road. The squad couldn't move until the gun was taken out. Whitaker whispered, "We need eyes." "I've got them," Sam murmured. "I can see the position." "Any clear shot?" "Not from here. The slats scatter the sight line. I'd be firing blind." Whitaker's jaw worked. "We can't expose ourselves. They'll cut us in half." Sam's eyes drifted along the interior wall. The boards were rough, old, layered with patches and nails, but something caught his attention. The wall thickness was uneven. Some panels were single planks, others doubled. He pressed lightly with his palm, feeling the give. One spot near the corner felt thin, soft from water damage. A bullet could punch through. But he wasn't interested in punching a bullet through it. He was thinking of something else entirely. "Whitaker," he whispered, holding his breath as another MG42 burst shredded the air. "If I carve out a shooting port, just enough, in this wall, I think I can hit them without ever showing myself." The sergeant blinked. "A cutout? With what, your teeth?" "My bayonet," Sam said. "This wood's half rotted. I can make a hole big enough to sight through." Whitaker stared at him. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Do it, but quietly. They can't hear you over that gun, but the moment they stop firing, freeze." Sam knelt, pulled his bayonet from its sheath, and placed the steel edge against the soft wood. The MG42 thundered again, shaking dust loose from the rafters. Sam waited until the burst reached full volume before pressing down and slicing into the wood. The blade sank easily. He carved a triangle first, silent under the gunfire, then chipped away the inner fibers. Every time the MG42 paused, he froze. Hand pressed to the wall, breath halted. His heartbeat felt louder than the weapon outside. The cutout grew, 3 inches, 5, enough to look through, enough to rest his rifle. Through the small, triangular opening, he could now see the MG42 team clearly, 2 men, 1 man behind the weapon, face taut, shoulders locked forward. Another feeding ammunition from a belt draped over his arm. Their nest was tight but exposed from this angle. Sam's pulse steadied. Back home, he had shot coyotes sprinting across fields at dusk. These men weren't sprinting. They were stationary, focused, predictable. He pulled his rifle into position, the barrel fitting neatly into the cutout. The angles were perfect. The Germans had no idea a wall now had eyes. Whitaker whispered, "You've got 1 shot. Hit the gunner first." Sam inhaled. The MG42 fired again. The vibration rattled the wood against his cheek. He aligned the sights, the world shrinking to a blurred barn interior and a perfectly framed gunner outside. He exhaled. He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the cold air, and the gunner dropped sideways off the weapon, his shoulder slamming the log barricade. The loader jerked in panic. Sam worked the bolt and fired again. The loader fell backward, legs kicking in the snow. The MG42 went silent for the first time in nearly an hour. Whitaker grabbed Sam's shoulder. "You beautiful son of a—" But the celebration froze instantly when they heard shouting in German, multiple voices. The MG42 team wasn't alone. Sam saw movement through the cutout, another group of Germans rushing toward the fallen weapon. They had reinforcements, a second gunner, possibly a second MG42. If they reached that position, the Americans would be right back where they started, trapped, pinned, and likely dead. Whitaker swore under his breath. "We're not done yet," Sam whispered, adjusting his grip. "They're coming fast." And the first shadows of German riflemen slid into view. The barn's air felt electric. The cutout Sam carved was about to become the only thing keeping his squad alive. And in the next moment, the Germans charged. The first German rifleman dashed into view, half crouched, snow spraying from his boots as he sprinted toward the MG42 nest. Sam fired through the barn wall cutout again, the shot cracking straight into the man's chest and folding him into the snow. But more were coming, 4, maybe 5, and they were shouting orders over each other, some diving behind crates, others dropping to one knee and firing toward the road where they assumed American forces still waited. They didn't know Sam's squad was already inside the barns. Whitaker motioned frantically for the others to spread out along the wall. Thompson crawled toward the far corner with his bayar. Alvarez crouched near the doorway, clutching 2 grenades he didn't dare throw yet. They needed to keep their position secret as long as possible. Sam stayed pressed to the cutout, its edges rough against his cheek, breath clouding the air. Outside, the Germans dragged the fallen MG42 gunner aside and shouted for a replacement. A second man hurried forward and grabbed the weapon's grips, pulling it back into firing-ready position. Another soldier slapped a belt into place. Sam knew he had less than 3 seconds before that weapon roared back to life. He fired first. The second gunner jerked violently and fell backward, arms flailing. The loader froze, some horror twisting across his face before he scrambled behind a stack of crates. Sam worked the bolt again, but this time the Germans didn't rush the gun. They had learned something was wrong, something they couldn't see. Whitaker whispered harshly, "They know someone's hitting them from somewhere. Brace yourselves." Snowlight glinted off a pair of German helmets as 2 riflemen peeked around the barricade, trying to locate the shooter. Sam lowered his profile, lifting only enough for the narrowest possible sight picture. He waited. The Germans moved again. The slightest silhouette behind the crate. Another shot cracked. Splinters burst from the barricade. 1 German jerked back, wounded or dead. But now they had found it, the direction of the shot. 1 German shouted, pointing directly at the barn Sam was in. Whitaker hissed, "Move!" The Germans opened fire instantly. Car 98 rounds hammered the barn's exterior, punching small, splintering holes through the boards. Dust rained from the rafters. Thompson returned fire with a burst from his bar that cut through the slats, forcing the Germans to duck. Sam stayed low, crawling 2 feet back from the wall as a round punched through where his head had been a second earlier. He felt the cold bite of fear, but also the sharper clarity that always hit him just before he squeezed a trigger. He eased forward again, carefully aligning the sights through his little triangular cutout. A German soldier lunged from behind the barricade, trying to drag the MG42 fully into cover. Sam fired, the man collapsing into the weapon, his hand still gripping the feed belt. Chaos erupted around the nest. A German grenadier sprinted forward, pulling a steel hand granite from his belt. His arm cocked back for a throw, not toward the road, but toward the barn row. Sam didn't let him throw it. 1 shot. The grenade dropped harmlessly into the snow, rolling to the side. But that single moment of reprieve vanished instantly as the second wave of Germans, fresh reinforcements, appeared from behind a ruined farmhouse. 6 men. Maybe 7. And among them was what Sam feared most. Another MG42 team carrying a spare weapon. Thompson muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Whitaker didn't miss a beat. "They want this road real bad. They're digging in. Delaney, keep the nest down. Thompson, lay suppressing fire on the newcomers. Alvarez, prep smokes. We may need a screen." Outside, the second MG42 team slid behind the farmhouse, taking a position angled toward the barns. They hadn't set up yet, but the barrel was coming around. Sam knew He only had seconds before the new gun opened up. He ducked to the cutout again. Through the narrow slice of light, he saw one of the newcomers running low with the spare MG42, trying to reach the original nest. Sam exhaled, squeezed, and the man crashed into the snow. Another German dove for the weapon. Sam shot him too. But the others were learning. They stopped rushing the nest and instead broke into two groups, one group returning fire at the barn row, the other circling around the farmhouse, trying to flank the Americans through an unguarded side. Whitaker cursed under his breath. "They're splitting. We got to adjust." "We need more visibility on the right flank," Thompson called. "I can't see them from here." Sam looked down the barn interior. The shadows, the collapsed beams, the broken planks littering the floor. An idea flickered. A dangerous one. "There's another gap in the far corner," he whispered. "I saw it earlier. If I crawl there, I might get a second angle." Whitaker hesitated. "How exposed?" "Not much. But if they push right up to the wall, I'm done." Whitaker studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Go. We need that angle." Sam slung his rifle and crawled across the hay-covered boards, every motion slow to keep sound minimal. Snow drifted in through the gaps, landing on his sleeves. The cold stung his fingers as he reached the far corner, where the wall had partially collapsed inward, leaving a jagged window-sized hole barely hidden behind a fallen beam. He pressed his shoulder to the frame and peeked. Germans were moving along the barn exteriors, two crouched low, one carrying a grenade, another covering him with a rifle. They were coming fast, using the barn row itself as cover from American fire. Sam steadied his breathing and brought the rifle up. In a single smooth motion, he fired. The lead flanker dropped. The others dove behind a pile of collapsed stones. Whitaker shouted from behind him, "Good shot, Delaney! Keep that flank locked down!" But the Germans had numbers on their side. Another flanking pair appeared, and another. Soon, Sam saw at least 5 crawling along the stones, inching closer to the barns. One German lobbed a grenade. Sam ducked as it clattered against the outside wall, rolling into the snow just a foot from the wood. He braced. The explosion rocked the barn, sending straw into the air and shaking the beams. Some dust dropped from the ceiling like flour shaken from a sack. Sam wiped his eyes clean and realigned the rifle. Through the jagged hole, he saw one of the Germans rising to rush forward. Sam shot him before he could take 2 steps. Another scrambled back, slipping in the snow. Sam fired again. Whitaker's voice rose behind him. "Delaney, you've got more moving left." Sam pivoted, sliding back to the original cutout he carved. His shoulder brushed the beam, his boots scraping softly across the boards. Through the narrow triangular opening, he saw Germans trying, again, to recover the MG42. They weren't giving up on that weapon. They wanted its field of fire. They needed it to lock down the American approach. Sam could not allow it. He shot the next man who touched it, then another, and another. Bodies piled near the fallen gun like discarded winter coats, steam rising faintly from where blood touched snow. Thompson unleashed another bar burst, cutting down 2 Germans who attempted to flank the road. Alvarez finally threw a smoke grenade out a side gap, creating a thick grey curtain that obscured some of the Germans' line of fire. The battlefield transformed into a blizzard of smoke, drifting snow, splintered wood and muzzle flashes. But the second MG42 team had finished setting up. Sam saw the barrels swing toward their barn. He felt the cold grip his chest. "Down!" he shouted. The MG42 erupted. Its rounds tore into the barn wall like an angry saw, splintering planks, sending shards of wood blasting through the air. Sam flattened into the floorboards, arms shielding his head as the wall shook violently. Thompson dove behind a feed trough. Alvarez threw himself behind a fallen beam. Whitaker rolled against a thick support post that somehow didn't snap under the impact. The weapon stopped only long enough for the team to adjust their barrel angle. Sam crawled breathlessly toward the second cutout. But the angle from here didn't give him a clear view of the new MG42 position. He needed a different angle. He needed a new cutout. He needed to carve one, fast. He grabbed his bayonet again, crawled toward the far wall opposite the new MG42, and looked for the weakest board, a water-rotted plank near a broken hinge. The MG42 thundered again. Sam sliced. The sound of his blade vanished beneath the roar. Wood fibers peeled away. Snow seeped in. A small opening formed, just enough. He pressed the rifle against the wall, shoved the barrel through the new gap, and saw the second MG42 team perfectly framed, firing from behind a fallen stone fence. Two men just like the first, one at the weapon, one feeding the belt. Sam inhaled. He fired. The gunner jerked backward. The loader screamed something in German. Sam adjusted and shot him too. The second MG42 fell silent. But the Germans were committed now. They weren't retreating. They weren't surrendering. They surged harder. More soldiers poured from behind the farmhouse, some firing wildly, others dropping to one knee to aim steady shots into the barns. One bullet cracked through the slats and grazed Thompson's arm. He cursed, binding it quickly with a torn strip of cloth while still firing bursts from his bar. Whitaker shouted, "Hold this place! Reinforcements are moving up from the rear. We just need to survive until they reach us." Another grenade arced in through a broken window and clattered across the floor. Sam dove, grabbed it, and hurled it back out the same opening. A distant explosion shook the ground. Whitaker gave Sam a stunned look. "You're out of your damn mind!" Sam crawled back to his original cutout. Germans were massing again near the first MG42, trying desperately to revive the position, trying to bring the weapon back to life. Sam exhaled. He fired. A soldier fell. Another grabbed the MG42. Sam fired again. Another soldier dropped. Whitaker shouted, "Delaney, you're holding back half a company by yourself!" But Sam barely heard him. His world had shrunk to the wall cutout. The snow, the flashes of movement, the rhythm of bolt, sight, breath, shot. The Germans hesitated again. Another wave faltered. Some dragged their wounded back. Some hid behind the farmhouse, refusing to attempt the MG42 again. But one determined German sergeant, a tall, thick-coated man with a rough beard, broke from cover and sprinted toward the fallen gun with 3 soldiers behind him. He wasn't stopping for anything. Sam knew this one would be fast. Too fast. He steadied the rifle, breath slow. He fired once. The sergeant staggered, but didn't fall. He fired again. The man collapsed forward into the snow, hand still reaching for the MG42's grip. The others froze. For the first time, hesitation rippled through the German line. For the first time, they weren't shouting orders. They were uncertain, afraid. The quiet between gunshots felt like pressure collapsing on itself. Then, from the woods behind the Americans, the faint rumble of movement appeared. Shouts, boots, the clatter of approaching rifles, reinforcements. Whitaker's eyes lit. "That's our boys!" But the Germans heard it too. Some began to pull back. Some retreated into the farmhouse. Others backed away from the road entirely. The assault was breaking. Sam leaned into the cutout, heart hammering, ready for a final shot at anyone still trying to revive the nest. But no one came. The MG42 lay still on the snowbank, surrounded by the frozen forms of the men who had died trying to man it. Sam's arms trembled with exhaustion as he lowered his rifle. The barn wall around him was riddled with holes, ragged splinters jutting from every angle, thin light leaking in through 100 fresh wounds. Whitaker approached, gripping Sam's shoulder. "You kept us alive," the sergeant said quietly. That damn cutout saved this entire flank." Sam looked at the cracked wood, the triangular hole he carved with shaking hands, and let out a long breath that fogged the cold air. Outside, the Germans were withdrawing, but the battle wasn't finished. Not for Sam, not for his squad. Whitaker glanced toward the farmhouse. "They'll regroup. They'll try again. And when they do," Sam nodded slowly, "I'll be ready." And the snow kept falling, silent and heavy, as the echoes of gunfire drifted away into the forest. The snow thickened as the echoes of the failed German assault faded into the winter air. Sam pressed his back against the battered barn wall, the cold boards vibrating faintly from distant artillery miles away. The barn smelled of burnt wood, cold soil, and cordite. Thompson sat beside a crumbling feed bin, clutching his wounded arm. Alvarez wiped grime from his face, breath trembling with the aftershock of nearly being overrun. Whitaker kept watch through the broken slats, his silhouette barely visible in the dim grey light. "Don't relax yet," Whitaker murmured. "They're reorganizing. Nobody throws that many men at a position without trying again." Sam nodded and wiped his brow, though the sweat instantly chilled. He crawled back to the cutout he had carved, his strange little window into the chaos outside. The wood was warm where his cheek had rested hours earlier, but the air beyond was sharp with cold. Through the triangular hole, the battlefield looked frozen in a strange stillness. Men lay where they had fallen, snow settling gently on their uniforms. Nothing moved. But Sam knew they were out there, the farmhouse, the orchard behind it, the crouching dark shapes behind the stone fence. Whitaker's hand tapped Sam's shoulder. "Delaney, look there." Sam leaned in and saw something new. A German runner sprinting from the farmhouse to the orchard, dipping low, throwing glances behind him. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He carried a box, metal, long, the size of a radio battery or ammunition crate. "They're not done," Whitaker muttered. "That's resupply." Sam tracked the runner carefully as he darted behind a wagon. Another German emerged, this one dragging a heavy tripod. Sam felt his pulse tighten. "They're bringing another MG," Whitaker spat into the hay. "Of course they are. They want this road locked down by nightfall. Or they won't be able to move their armour." Sam's breath trembled, but his hands were steady. He squinted down the sight line from his cutout. Smoke drifted along the battlefield, mixing with fog. The forms were faint, but not invisible. "They're setting it up behind the orchard fence," Sam whispered. "How many?" Whitaker asked. 3. No, 4. 1 carrying the barrel, 2 with ammo belts, 1 pulling the tripod." Thompson groaned. "They brought a whole damn parade." Whitaker inhaled slowly. "What do they think we are? A platoon? It's just 5 of us." Sam didn't answer. He was already adjusting his angle, lining up his rifle on the new positions. But this time the Germans were smarter. They were setting up far back, behind a stone wall that gave near-perfect protection. Sam could only see shapes, shadows, movement. No clear shot. Whitaker frowned. "They've learned from you, Delaney." Sam kept watching. "I need a new angle." "Then make one." Sam crawled toward the barn's far corner, where the wall met a collapsed section of the roof. Snow had drifted inside through the gap, forming a soft mound. He pressed his shoulder against the boards, listening. Voices. German. Calm voices, not panicked, methodical. A team resetting, preparing something big. He slid his bayonet free again. The wood here was thicker than before, harder. The first slice made only a scratch. He pressed harder using both hands, timing each movement to the distant artillery thumps. Alvarez whispered sharply, "They're moving again." "Cover Delaney," Whitaker ordered. Sam carved deeper. A crack spidered across the board. He pressed his thumb to it, soft enough. He sliced again, making a small triangular outline. Thin wood splintered free. A shaft of snowy air rushed in. He leaned forward and saw them. The Germans were forming a full fire team. 8 men now. 2 MG teams, 1 already assembling, another waiting with spare barrels. They crouched behind the stone wall, their helmets bobbing as they spoke. One man pointed toward the barn row. Sam adjusted his rifle, but the angle still wasn't clean. Not until one helmet lifted higher, just enough to sight a breath, a silhouette, the faintest edge of a jawline. Sam fired. The helmet snapped backward, and the man fell sideways. The others dropped instantly behind the wall. Whitaker let out a low whistle. "You're not human." But the Germans recovered quickly. They dragged the fallen man behind the wall and shouted new orders. A smoke grenade burst open near the orchard, sending thick white clouds drifting toward the barn. "They're covering their setup," Alvarez muttered. Sam exhaled slowly. "They're about to fire that MG." As if answering him, a deep metallic clank echoed across the snow, a final piece locking into place. Whitaker shouted, "Positions!" Sam pressed his face to the new cutout, sightlines narrowing into a perfect tunnel of tension. The German MG crew swung the barrel over the wall. Sam fired. He missed. By inches. The gunner ducked. The loader slapped the belt into place. The gunner rose again. Sam fired and struck the loader instead. He fell backwards, screaming, clutching his shoulder. The gunner cursed and continued setting the weapon. Sam reloaded, heart hammering. The MG rose one final inch. He fired. The gunner dropped. The MG sagged to the side. Thompson grinned, exhausted. "Delaney, you are single-handedly ruining their whole day." But Sam didn't smile, because through the drifting smoke, he saw more Germans advancing, riflemen, grenadiers, another squad with machine pistols. The farmhouse door burst open as a new unit emerged, led by an officer with binoculars and a pistol holster strapped to his chest. "Here comes the company commander," Whitaker muttered. Sam squinted. The officer raised binoculars and studied the barn row, calmly, deliberately. Then he pointed directly at Sam's barn. He had found the source of the deadly cutout. Whitaker whispered, "Brace yourselves. He's about to throw everything he has at us." The Germans fanned out, forming a combat line. Some crouched behind the stone wall, others moved to the flanks. A pair of grenadiers spread out on the right, testing angles for a throw. The officer shouted something sharp, like a whip crack. "They're going to storm the barns," Thompson said flatly. "Not if we hold them," Whitaker replied. Sam swallowed hard. His cheek brushed the cold wood as he leaned into the cutout once more. Then, all hell broke loose. A barrage of rifle fire slammed into the barn, bullets punching holes through the boards, sending splinters flying like shrapnel. Alvarez threw himself behind a beam as pieces of hay and dust erupted around him. Thompson returned fire in a rhythmic roar, the BAR kicking against his wounded arm, each burst echoing through the barn. Sam aimed through the cutout and shot the nearest German rifleman square in the chest. The next dropped beside him, snow blooming red. The grenadier on the right pulled a stick grenade from his belt. Sam shot him before he pulled the cord. Another soldier lunged to retrieve the grenade. Sam shot him too. The Germans shifted tactics. A group of 3 sprinted toward the wagon, trying to use it as forward cover. Thompson's bar cut them down, one collapsing over the wagon's axle. The officer shouted angrily and waved his men toward the orchard again. Sam saw movement. Another MG team trying to reposition behind the fence. He whipped to the second cutout, lined up the sight, and fired twice. Both men fell. Again, the assault faltered, but the officer didn't retreat. He paced behind the wall, shouting orders, rallying his men, pushing more soldiers forward. Whitaker muttered, "He won't break. He's too stubborn." More Germans moved left, trying to flank the barns again. Sam slid to the jagged hole on the right side and fired into the advancing group. 2 fell. The rest ducked behind debris. Whitaker whispered urgently, "Delaney, they're coming at us from 3 angles now." Sam's chest tightened. "Then I need 3 angles to shoot from." Without waiting for an order, he moved deeper into the barn, scouting for another weak piece of wall. The far left side had been damaged by earlier shell fire. Its boards were brittle, cracked from the blast. Sam pressed his palm to them. They flexed. He carved fast. The MG in the orchard could still open up at any moment, and the Germans weren't slowing. A new cutout formed, a rough circular split in the wood. Cold air rushed in. Through it, Sam saw the Germans forming a wedge formation behind the farmhouse. Preparing for a final push, a grenadier clutched 4 sticks at once. Sam shot him before he could throw any. Another soldier grabbed the grenades. Sam shot him too. Thompson, bleeding and pale, kept firing steady bursts. Alvarez ducked out of a gap and threw a grenade that exploded behind the fence, scattering a cluster of Germans. Whitaker barked, "Delaney, lay down whatever you have left." Sam pressed his rifle to the new cutout. Outside, the officer raised his pistol, signaling the final assault. Sam didn't look away. His trigger finger tightened. The officer shouted. Sam fired. The officer collapsed mid-command, snow spraying beneath him as he fell. The German line shuddered. Some froze. Some backed away. Some threw down their arms and dragged their wounded. The orchard went quiet. The farmhouse door shut. A whistle sounded, a retreat signal. They were breaking. Whitaker leaned against a beam, exhaling shakily. "They're done." Thompson let his bar rest on his knee. "Delaney, I've never seen shooting like that." Alvarez sat heavily against the wall. "3 firing ports. You carved 3 firing ports." Sam looked at the cutouts, one triangular, one jagged, one circular, all carved in desperation, all now glowing faintly with cold white light leaking from the outside world. He hadn't noticed how badly his hands trembled until now. Outside, the sound of American reinforcements finally reached them. Boots crunching snow, voices calling through the trees as a fresh platoon approached the road. Sam slumped back against the barn wall, his breath fogging in long, shaky bursts. The battle had lasted hours, though it felt like one continuous inhaled breath that he had only now released. Whitaker crouched beside him. "Delaney, you didn't just hold that flank." He gestured toward the battlefield. Corpses around the MG42 nest, the wrecked assault line, the abandoned orchard position. You stopped a full German company by yourself. Sam shook his head slowly. "No, we all did." Whitaker smiled faintly. "Maybe, but you were the one who carved the walls. You were the one who found the angles." Sam looked again at the crude openings in the barn. They were ugly, uneven, splintered, yet somehow elegant in their purpose. Each one gave him exactly what he needed, a position the Germans could not anticipate, a view of the battlefield they could not cover, a rifleman's creativity under fire. Outside, Lieutenant Branson arrived with reinforcements, eyes wide as he surveyed the scene. "What the hell happened here?" Whitaker pointed at Sam. "Ask him." Branson approached, kneeling beside Sam. "Private, did you take out all those MG crews?" Sam swallowed, exhausted. "Yes, sir." Branson stared. "With what?" Sam glanced at the nearest cutout. "A barn wall." Branson blinked twice. "A barn wall?" Whitaker chuckled. "His little cutouts. He turned the whole place into a firing gallery." Branson looked at Sam with a mixture of disbelief and something like awe. "Private, remind me never to underestimate a man with a bayonet and an idea." Sam lowered his rifle, finally letting the weight ease off his shoulders. Snow continued to drift through the holes he had carved, settling gently on the barn floor. The battle was over. But the story of the rifleman who turned a collapsing barn into a fortress, who carved firing ports under fire, who neutralized 3 MG42 teams, who stopped a company's advance by skill, instinct and grit, was only just beginning. And long after the war, soldiers would tell that story with a kind of reverence. How one US rifleman's barn wall cutout took out a German MG42 team, and then another, and saved an entire American flank in the snowbound hell of 1944.